Hi, Mark Warwa here in beautiful Langley at our constituency office, and I'm with Markita Kaulius with Families for Justice. And Markita, you and I have been working on the issue of impaired driving for many, many years. You've sent thousands of petitions to Ottawa. In the lead up to the last election, actually during the election, you received a letter from Prime Minister Trudeau. He was the leader of the Liberals at the time, and he promised that he would provide legislation that would provide serious consequences for impaired driving with mandatory minimums. And your Families for Justice have asked for 5 years. If you kill somebody, the first offense would be at least 5 years. So the Liberal government introduced legislation called C-46, and in the passage of C-46, their mandatory minimums are not 5 years. And I sat at that committee, was brokenhearted as the Liberal members being instructed by the Prime Minister's office that no, it would be $1,000. And so it was shocking. But what is even more shocking is the recent introduction of a motion. It's 148. 148 is going to have, instead of getting tough and having legislation that provides a serious consequence for driving drunk and killing somebody, or not just drunk, it's impaired. So motion 148 will, instead of getting tough, is going to have a week. It'll be called the
National Week of Remembrance, I believe it's called.
Yes, well, it's a Impaired Driving Prevention Week, and instead of doing something, they're going to have a week to remember those that have been killed by impaired driving, and it's a National Impaired Driving Prevention Week. And when I first heard about that, I was very upset, very angry. So you, as with Families for Justice, I contacted you right away and I said, Markita, how would you like me to vote on this? Because I was hoping I would have your blessing to vote against it, because I think it's a facade, it's a sham, it is not where Canadians are. But I wish we didn't have to talk about this because you personally have lost your daughter to an impaired driver. Cassandra was killed, and so our hearts continue to go and break with you. But how would you like members of Parliament to vote on 148?
Well, Mark, I've been fighting now for tougher laws since 2011, so we're almost 7 years now, and still nothing has really changed in that time. I don't approve of the bill 148. That's like, to me, putting on a Band-Aid on someone that's dying. It doesn't address the true problem that we have in this country. When we're losing 4 to 6 people a day, and 190 a day are injured by impaired drivers in Canada, to have a National Week of Remembrance is nothing. I mean, for those of us that have lost our loved ones, we live it every day. We remember every day when we used to have our loved ones in our life. And Mr. Trudeau wrote a letter to me in 2015, before he became Premier, saying that he would support one of the bills that we had, Cassandra's Law, and that was to amend the Criminal Code of Canada, and we asked that they redefine the offence of vehicular homicide. From impaired driving causing death to vehicular homicide. And he did say he would support that. Since then, that bill has been voted down by the Liberal government. We just feel that the government is not doing enough. We see low sentences continue to happen to impaired drivers. We have great concern as now they want to legalize marijuana. We've looked at the stats from other provinces as well, and impaired driving has risen 13% in Colorado and 17% in Washington State. We have great concerns for public safety here in Canada, and we feel very let down by the government. And in speaking with so many families over the last 7 years, they cannot believe that our justice system is the way that it is, and it's so lax in the way of sentencing that is given out when a death has been involved. A life has been taken, and we're seeing sentences of $100 fine, 90 days to be served on weekends, $1,500 fines. That's ridiculous. I mean, we need to start to have some sentences that are appropriate for the crime, severity of the crime, and we need to have a government and a justice system who will be there to protect the public, and right now they are not.
So for members that will be voting next week in the House of Commons on motion 148, to have a week, National Impaired Driving Prevention Week, would you ask that they support it or oppose it?
I would ask that they oppose it, and I would also remind them that they could be, or one of their family members could be, the next victim of an impaired driver. And what would they rather have? A tougher sentencing law in place for the person that killed their loved one, or would they rather just have a week to remember them by?
Thank you, Markita.